Hello everybody and welcome back to Expert Examiner IELTS. My name is Glyn and in this video we're going to do some more speaking feedback, this time with Sumaiya's speaking test. So let's jump straight in. Good afternoon, my name is Glyn. Would you please tell me your full name?
Good afternoon. My full name is Sumaiya Bahrami.
And what should I call you?
You can call me by my first name, please, Sumaiya.
Thank you. And remember that part of the test isn't measured, right? What's your name? What should I call you? Doesn't matter how you answer that. Now, in this first part of the test, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself. Do you work or do you study?
Actually, I've been working as a technical engineer in medical devices for 10 years.
Cool, I've been working for 10 years. Nice grammar.
And nowadays, I'm planning to apply for university.
So from this, it sounds like, right, I've been working for 10 years. Sounds like she's currently in that job. I used to work or I worked for 10 years would be if you're not working in that job anymore. But then a later answer makes me confused about whether she's still in that job or not. But okay, let's continue. And what do you like most about your work?
Oh, well, in my work, I was in charge of.
See, I was in charge. When she says I've been working for 10 years, this use of present perfect continuous with how long suggests that this is still true, right? If I say I've been living in this house for 10 years, it means I'm still living here now. And if I say I've been doing this job for 10 years, it suggests I'm still doing that job now. But then she says I was in charge of, which makes me think that maybe she's not still in that job. So I'm a little bit unsure because of the grammar.
Providing some services for medical devices, which means that we are working for
providing some services for medical devices. The language comes out of the candidate very, very naturally, very fluently.
Patient and hospital, and that's the most important part of my job that I feel.
That is the most important part of my job. So now we're back to present time. So I'm not sure if she still has this job or not.
It's give me sense of satisfaction.
It's give. Is that what we said? It's give. Let's listen.
An important part of my job that I feel it's give me sense of
it's give. And I spoke to the candidate about this basic grammar stuff, like before the test and after the test. This present simple, when we use the verb to be and when we don't use the verb to be, right? It is good, adjective. It is a cup, noun. It is here, location. But not with simple verbs. Do not say it is give. It is give, I am, do, things like this. We don't use that verb to be there. Now, this is one of the most basic parts of English grammar. It doesn't mean that the grammar is easy. Certainly, I think present simple in English is incredibly complex. It's a very difficult bit of grammar to get right, but it is the grammar that we use the most, right? About 60% of spoken English is in the present simple, and so we really have to get that present simple right. And hearing it's give from the candidate, along with, very fluent language, great vocabulary, really understandable pronunciation, all of that stuff is good. And we had some nice grammar. I've been working here for 10 years. But then with it is give. Now, of course, if it's just one mistake with this, not a problem. But if we get many, many mistakes with that present simple, it could create a bit of a headache for an examiner.
satisfaction because I provide the services for a patient.
And do you think you'd like to continue working in this kind of job in the future?
Well, nobody knows what lies in future. How
Nobody knows what lies in future. So it's an attempt at complex vocab. Nobody knows what lies ahead in the future. Nobody knows what lies in front of us in the future. But we need something after that lies. So it's an attempt at less common lexes.
foreseeable future.
Cool, foreseeable future, very nice.
I'm planning to do so with minor changes in my responsibility.
Sounds like minor changes, which sounds strange. Some minor changes, yes. Minor changes, no. Let's talk about clothes now. What kind of clothes do you usually wear?
Okay, when I was younger, I used to put on a casual clothes like t-shirt or baggy jeans. However, these days I'm trying to
Okay, so I guess the candidate is using this very famous strategy of like mixing the past with the present. You know, I know many people advise that to show a greater range of grammar. Certainly don't have to do it, but I think it works okay here. In the past, I used to da 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 da. However, nowadays, I da 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 da.
dress up and look professional
Cool, dress up, very nice.
and put on some suits in occasion in the
Cool, so topic specific vocab. We've had baggy jeans, put on some suits, all good stuff.
occasional situation.
And do you like buying new clothes?
Yes, buying new clothes is kind of hobby for me, and it's really kind of hobby that I can show my individuality through outlet and
Wonderful word building here. So most people might know the word individual, but individuality, very good stuff. Really good use of suffixes there.
it's a kind of good way to
And just notice a good V. So sometimes the candidate pronounces her W as a V. So it's a good V, just a little bit V-ish.
but to do some hobbies in my daily life.
And just a little bit of a breakdown in fluency, but okay, let's move on.
And have you ever given clothes to somebody as a gift or a present?
Well, I've tried to avoid that. I
Cool, tried to avoid that, very nice.
have done that before,
Cool, I have done that before. Candidate is showing a nice, really nice variety of structures, grammatical structures.
but it's a little bit individual preferences, so that I try to not give them as a gift.
Try to not give them. Now, some people might say negative infinitive is I try not to give them. Try to not give them is the type of like grammatical mistake, if you can call it that, that native speakers use. And it is written in the IELTS band descriptors that if the candidate makes a grammatical mistake, which is typical of a native speaker, an L1 user, then we can forget about it and not even consider it to be a mistake. And that's one. Try to not do something. Absolutely fine. No problem at all.
Or present, because it might not be very suit to them, or
It not be very suit. So suit is a verb, so we don't use be. Suitable, it might not be. Do we get might or do we just get it not be?
to them, or they might not like the color
Just go back again. Sorry.
to them, or they must to them, or
Sorry.
to not give them as a gift or present, because it might not be
I think there is a might. It might not.
very suit to them,
Might not be very suitable for them, or it might not suit them.
or they might not like the color, and so I'm trying to avoid that.
Again, I'm try. Just I hear I'm try. You tell me what you hear. Do you hear I try or I'm try?
To them, or they might not like the color, and so I'm trying to avoid.
I hear I'm try. So it is give, I am try. That's problematic, but then on the other hand, we do get a huge variety. Now, one question I could ask myself here is, well, does the grammatical mistake impede my understanding? Does this grammatical mistake stop me from understanding what the candidate is trying to say? And the answer is definitely no. These are non-impeding mistakes, but they are very basic mistakes. So decisions.
Avoid that.
Now let's move on and talk about the news. How often do you check the news?
I check the news through the social media platform on a regular basis.
Cool, on a regular basis, fine. That matches how often?
Actually, on a daily basis, I'm very
On a daily basis, fine.
keen on what's happening.
I'm not a fan of keen on. I've mentioned it many times. Fond of keen on. I don't like it at all. It just sounds forced and fake. And I don't know anyone in the UK that uses it really. Maybe people in the US. Do I know anyone in the US? Nah, I've heard of keen like a pre-modifying adjective, like I'm a keen sportsman or something like this. Maybe I'm keen on it. Just sound okay, but okay. I know half of the English-speaking world learn keen on and fond of as synonyms for I like, and I can't do anything to fight against that. So okay, I'll accept it.
Around the globe, and I try to.
Love little terms like this too, around the globe. Very nice.
Keep myself updated with reading and news.
And do you prefer local, national, or international news?
I prefer international news because I think it's adversely or sometimes positively affect all around
Cool, just missing that S there, but I love adversely or positively affects. Should get that S, but okay, the vocab is very
all
good.
people lives because we are generally living in a global village.
Cool, we're generally living in a global village. Now, this is the type of like natural, idiomatic, colloquial type of language that I like. We're all living in a global village. I really like expressions like this. I don't like expressions like the grass is always greener on the other side, or that's the way the cookie crumbles, or down in the dumps, or on cloud nine. I don't like those cliched, overused idiomatic expressions, but I love things like we're living in a global village. I just feel like it is natural
And I mean, with
and it doesn't sound forced.
globalization, the local or domestic news, no, doesn't make sense anymore to my mind.
Cool, lots of good stuff there.
And do you speak about the news with your friends or family?
Yes, very much so.
Love this very much so too. Very much so. Very nice.
When I read the news,
Again, when I read, just a little bit of the words are becoming fuzz, right?
when I read the news,
When I read, just when I read, when, just a little bit fuzzy.
it make an impression on me. I try
Again, we get that mistake with present simple. So we want, when I read the news, it makes an impression on me. Does the candidate hit that S? Let's find out.
when I read the news, it make an impression on
It's make. And again, it is give, it is make. So, I am try. That's 3 times now we've had verb to be before a simple verb. I am try, it is give, it is makes.
me. I try to
Do be careful with that. Some examiners really don't like mistakes with present simple. I mean, I'll talk about that a little bit later when I give the score. But I certainly think that will be one of the bits of advice that I give you, is just to tighten up and find a way to control that simple grammar.
get rid of this kind of news
Cool. Get rid of. Very nice.
with speaking with my friends or relatives.
But I'm not sure what get rid of the news means. I'm not quite sure what you mean there when you. I love get rid of, as in like to throw away. I'm not quite sure that it fits there. Maybe.
And try to analyze what's happening around the world.
And do you buy physical newspapers?
I try to do so because I
I like that hesitation. Preparing content, not trying to find language. Good.
want to support the local news. However, it's
It's a bit strange, right? She wants to support the local news, but at the same time, she said she doesn't really see the sense of local news. Well, that's what she said earlier, because we're all living in a global village and international news is more important. But okay.
it doesn't happen very much because reading newspaper and reading news on the social media is more convenient and inexpensive and come in handy so that
So, yeah, it is more convenient and inexpensive and come in handy. We can't throw a verb in there with those adjectives, right? It's convenient, it's inexpensive, and it comes in handy. So we can't just throw in. I love the fact that you're using that come in handy, but come in handy just seems to be a synonym for convenient. And I really don't like stacking synonyms. I don't like it when people say things like, oh, I like that movie because it was good and it was fascinating and it was interesting. It's like, well, all of those things mean the same thing. Convenient and comes in handy. Yeah, so we don't need to stack synonyms like this.
mostly follow them.
Okay, thank you. Now,
all right, thoughts on part 1. Candidate is a very confident and very comfortable speaker. Her fluency is very nice. Her pronunciation is very, very easy to understand, in spite of a few issues with like the V instead of the W. Okay, but her speech is more or less connected. There are some occasions where she kind of thinks about a particular word, like I don't do it very much, and she like it seems like she's trying to access the word like very often, but she changes to much, and so there are just minimal cases where the candidate you just feel her searching for a bit of language, but doesn't happen very often. On the whole, she's very, very fluent, no problems there. In terms of grammar, we have a nice mix, a very complicated mix of simple grammatical mistakes with very accurate complex structures. So I don't know what to do with that. Usually we see the opposite, where candidates can control their grammatical accuracy with simple grammar, but they have difficulties with complex grammar. This candidate seems to be better with complex grammar than she is with simple grammar. And there's nothing that helps the examiner to make a decision like that. It's just not in the criteria. But okay, we'll make that decision a little bit later. Vocab, great, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I think it's, the candidate is a very, very strong speaker, and I think she does know a lot of natural terms like around the globe, and we're all living in a global village. And when she's speaking about her job, she can speak about those like I don't know, those engineering devices or something like that with real comfort. So very, very strong part one from the candidate. Let's see how she does in part two. She has to talk about a time when she gave a presentation or spoke in public.
Yes, sir, I do.
I will now.
Sorry, I'm just jumping ahead. That's about fine.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the end of your preparation time. To remind you, you will have between 1 and 2 minutes to give your talk, and I will let you know when the time is up. Can you start speaking now, please?
Well, I would like to talk about the presentation I gave.
I would like to talk you. Is that what the candidate says?
Well, I would like to talk about the
You can't talk somebody. You can tell somebody, I would like to tell you about, or I'd like to talk about, or I would like to talk to you about, but not I would like to talk you about.
presentation I gave at the local university in my country. I'm
Maybe say when. That might help.
an electronic engineer and I work in the medical devices.
Okay, so she's going to talk about a time she gave a presentation at a university. We don't know when, and now I work as an electronics engineer or something. So I hope I got that right.
I'm an electronic engineer and I work in the medical devices. As a part of my
I work in the medical devices, in the medical devices sphere. I work with medical devices, maybe, but not I work in medical devices.
job, I have to train staff with new devices and
Have to train staff. She does have this like Iranian just a little bit there. Train staff or train staff? Let's see.
I'm an electronic engineer and I work in the medical devices. As a part of my job, I have to train staff with
Just a little bit, train staff. You can just hear it a little bit. Again, this is just part of the Iranian accent, and it won't really affect her massively with pronunciation, but it is just an interesting thing to note. Candidate isn't the first Iranian person I've had on the channel, and it's interesting to see how many of the Iranians have this Iranian school, staff, and things like this. Spanish people have the same problem.
new devices and keep themselves updated about
Keep themselves. I have to keep them updated, not themselves. So I'm just trying to, because I remember doing this test and just feeling like in part two, I found it quite difficult to follow the talk, and I'm trying to diagnose that and trying to understand why I found it quite difficult. Maybe I was too focused on grammar or vocab or something, so I couldn't focus on coherence. But I am pausing this a lot just to make sure that I understand. So let's backtrack. This is a presentation that she gave at a university before. She works as an electronic engineer, and she works in the medical devices sphere. She works with medical devices, and part of her job is to train staff to make sure that they are updated. To make sure that the staff are updated or that the devices are updated. I guess that the staff are updated. And by that, maybe we mean make sure that the staff know how to use these medical devices, I guess.
the latest release version.
Latest release version, I guess, of the new devices, maybe?
So that it goes back almost 6 years ago, if I'm not mistaken,
Okay, so now we get the time 6 years ago.
when for the first time I was in charge.
The first time I was in charge, but we're still not at that time when you gave a presentation, right? And we're not looking for a broad time. We're not looking for like a period in your life. Really, we're looking for one presentation, one single time when you gave a presentation or spoke in public. And we haven't quite got there. We've got a lot of background information, but will we hear something about the one presentation that you gave?
to do so. It was a challenging situation, and I was very nervous, and I was very
It was challenging. I was nervous.
anxious.
I was anxious. Again, for me, nervous and anxious, I know there are people who will say that they're different, but they're kind of very close, aren't they?
And never in my life
I was nervous, I was anxious and nervous. Just listen to that part again.
and do so. It was a challenging situation, and I was very nervous, and I was very anxious, and
I was nervous, I was very anxious and nervous. And I think it's because she's busy thinking about this next bit of beautiful grammar that she's going to use. Listen to
do
this.
so. It was a challenging situation, and I was very nervous, and I was very anxious, and never in my life had I been in such situation.
Never in my life had I been in such a situation. Now, great that she's activated this complex bit of grammar. It's called inversion. If you've never heard of it or if it sounds strange, don't worry. Most English learners never get to C1 grammar, and so they never hear of it. But never had I been in such a situation. Great, great, great grammar. But for me, I think she's really made a special effort to insert that grammar. And I think that's why the bit of language before suffers a little bit, because she's too busy just thinking, okay, activate this grammar. I was very nervous, I was anxious, I was because never before had I been in such a situation. So it just stands out as a little bit strange, but it is great that you activated that grammar, and it is, perfectly controlled for accuracy. Good job.
To do some kind of presentation in front of many people who were professional.
But still, we get the idea that you had to, as part of your job, you had to make sure that staff were up to date. But we're still not, I still don't see in my mind you speaking in front of a group of people. I think about this period in your life when in general you had to do this. But, the task is to describe a time when you gave a presentation. So you really should be telling a story about, you want the listener here to imagine and to be able to see in their mind's eye, to see you giving this presentation something. Okay, so I was like standing in front of like about 100 people, and I felt myself getting really nervous. I started sweating and my mouth was really dry, and I looked in the audience and one person was looking at me like with this really serious face. Those type of details help to bring the listener to understand the story that's going on. You seem to be speaking about a period of your life where you had to give presentations in general, but I don't get into the story. I can't, again, I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry, I can't just see you on stage or in front of people giving that public talk.
A professional professor or physician and doctors. So
Not physician, but physician.
so that it made me a little bit stressed, and
Made me a little bit stressed. Again, this Iranian is really noticeable here. It made me a little stressed. Made me a little stressed. I know it's not always easy. Little stress. Much easier to say less stress. A little less stressed, but a little stressed.
anxious. However, I try to prepare
Again, we get stressed, and that word anxious comes back.
myself very well, and I prepared some kind of slide, and
Some type of slide, just one.
I practiced so many times, and I should admit that I was very good at the presentation, and
Yeah, I don't know, but I should admit, I have to say, is probably just slightly more natural. I should admit I was very good at this. I have to say I was very good at this. I think it just sounds a little better.
teach some staff and personnel and doctors about the latest version of the devices and how they can work with that in the best situation. to take advantage of this kind of versions.
Again, I'm just okay. So I understand who the audience was, but again, I'm not fully in the story here, not in the narrative.
After that, I was awarded in my in the office with some kind of financial reward, like perks and incentives. And
Yeah, so again, it just seems like the candidate is trying to activate the word perks and incentives. But what do you mean here? What does it mean to be awarded with a financial reward? Okay, maybe recognized with a financial reward. And then instead of saying perks and incentives, it seems strange to be rewarded with an incentive. Now, an incentive is a positive reason to do something, right? Like, let's say I want to eat chocolate, but I decide not to eat chocolate. And what is my incentive? Well, my incentive is to kind of lose weight. The positive thing that I keep in mind. For most people, for many people, money is a big incentive, a good positive reason to do something. So it sounds strange to be rewarded for doing something well with an incentive, because incentives are designed to drive your actions going forward, whereas rewards are for, it's post factum, it's after the fact they give that to you. So just a little bit strange with that perks and incentives, just stands out as a little bit odd. And I think that's the type of stuff that might just stop you from getting the band 8. It's great that you use pairs of words like perks and incentives, that you put them together, group them together, but they're just not fully right. Many of the natural bits of language that you have are entirely appropriate, but there are a few cases now where it's like, that just doesn't quite sound right.
Actually, the most important thing about this and what struck me about it was that I gained a lot of sense of
Again, it doesn't seem like now she's talking about past time now. It strike me.
the most important thing about this and what struck me about
What strike me? It should be what struck me in the past.
it was that I gained a lot of sense
I gained. So we're missing some basic past time here too.
of satisfaction, and it's enhanced my
It's enhance. Again, we're back to that. It is give, it's enhance. Again, it enhanced. We need past time here. And again, we get this, it is enhanced. So this is a systematic error. This is a repeated error for the candidate, that she uses the verb to be before simple verbs.
confidence. And had it not been for this kind of experience, I wouldn't have been able to come
And then we get that. If it hadn't been for this, I wouldn't have got, if it had, oh, did she say if it hadn't been, or had it not been for? Let's listen.
enhance my confidence. And had it not been for this
Had it not been for. Now, it's very difficult to explain just how complex this grammar is. Firstly, it's an inverted third conditional. Secondly, it has that construction be not for something. Like if it hadn't been for, or had it not been for, which again, I've spent so much time in the classroom over my years of teaching trying to explain this, like, oh, if it wasn't for you, or if it weren't for you, or if it wasn't for him, or if it weren't for them, if it hadn't been for all of that stuff, it's really super high level stuff. You would never ever expect a B2 candidate to produce that naturally, in the right context, accurately. Very rarely would you expect inversion. Very rarely would you expect a C1 candidate to produce that type of language either. This is, I don't like dividing bits of grammar into, C1, B2, and so on. But this is something I would expect only from a C2 candidate. And so we get mistakes like it is enhance. And then we also get had it not been for. Followed up by wouldn't have been able to. It's like, oh my goodness, the candidate has both mastered English and also not learnt the basics. Interesting, very interesting.
kind of experience, I wouldn't have been able to come up with kind of
I wouldn't have been able to. Just so nice.
Okay, thank you. All right, so you've
All right.
been talking about a time when.
So let's give feedback on part 2. So grammar is just a headache again, because we have the most basic mistakes with the most advanced grammar. Basic mistakes with very, very, very accurate advanced grammar. Odd. Vocab, again, very, very strong. A couple of cases of inappropriate usage. Pronunciation, a couple of cases of this it's, the Iranian is. But apart from that, absolutely fine, perfectly intelligible, connected speech, intonation is decent, good, all good stuff. Fluency, yeah, no problems at all. A couple of cases where she drops, but the coherence is a bit of a problem. I just felt like, didn't really satisfy the demands of the task, where we're looking for one story about one time, one event like occurrence in your life. We didn't quite get that coherence, but the fluency was good. So let's see how the candidate does in part 3, because it's been 30 minutes already.
You gave a presentation in public. Let's talk now about public speaking and communication. Why is public speaking important in today's world?
Well, in today's world, many people are encouraged to give some public speaking, and
Public speaking. Again, we get that little Iranian speaking.
Because people are generally more willing to interact with each other
Cool. Be willing to interact with somebody. Nice.
and take advantage of the others'
So lots of good vocab, but I don't know about the actual direct answer to the question, right? Why is public speaking considered to be an important skill? And we get this, they're encouraged to interact with each other. Okay, all great bits of grammar and vocab, but not a wholly satisfying answer, I think.
knowledge, and they are more willing to share knowledge. For example, TED Talk
Okay, people are more willing to share knowledge, but does that answer the question about why public speaking is important? I'm not quite sure.
is a kind of example that people are encouraged and inspired to give some speech and
To give? We don't use to give, to give.
to share their experience with other people.
Okay, so a lot of good vocab and grammar, but not a massively satisfying answer to the question.
And how can people improve their communication skills?
Well, first of all, they have to work on their
Love this. First of all, they have to.
self-esteem and self-confidence, because it's the kind of challenging situation, and maybe people need to work on them by taking a small step. For example, being ready and
Cool, but can you explain how improving self-confidence and self-esteem will help communication skills?
actually practice in front of the mirror or practice in local communities, and it's helped them to gradually
It's help. So that's, again, it is help. Now we've had it is give, it is help, it is enhance, I am try.
improve their self-esteem and be confident enough to speak in front of the many people.
Okay, that answer kind of works. It's a little bit, the logic of it, the order of things, it's a little bit odd, but it does make sense. There is underlying coherence that, if you want to be a better communicator, learn to speak. Improve your self-esteem and confidence, practice by speaking in front of the mirror, then you'll be more confident, and then you'll be able to speak better. Cool.
Some people say that communication isn't a skill that you can learn. You are just naturally born with it or born without it. What do you think about this opinion?
Actually, it can be partly true.
Cool.
However, I think it's
Nice hedging language. It can be partly true. Very nice.
the kind of a skill that people can gain and achieve through some kind of lesson. And I think that nobody born with a lot of talent
Nobody is born.
or is very gifted in this regard, and they can boost their confidence and skills through the journey.
Again, I maybe just lacking in detail for an answer here, because she says it's partly true, and then later she says that nobody is born with these skills. So again, I'm not quite sure what the candidate's position is here.
And let's talk about
And certainly it could have been developed more. just take a position. No, I don't think you're born with any of these skills. I think it is just something that you learn to do. I think, if you took twins, for example, and you separated them at birth, and one of them grew up in a very communicative family and the other one grew up in a very introverted family, I think the one who grew up in the communicated family would learn to pick up some of those communication skills and would be better communicators, right? That gives a clear position and okay, maybe the idea is quite complex, not very simple. But I still think that, there could be a clearer answer, a clearer position.
Communicating with neighbors. Do you think people in the past communicated with their neighbors more than we do today?
Yes, I think it's unfortunately it's happening right now. People are more responsible, more engaged in their hectic lifestyle and the nature
Okay, and they're more engaged in their hectic lifestyle. Feels like the candidate is trying too hard to activate language. I think the candidate's natural language is already good enough. You don't need to always put in this, like, they are too engaged in their hectic lifestyle. I don't know anybody who speaks like this, like, apart from if they're in a job interview. If they're in a job interview or if they're speaking in any situation where they have to use heightened English, fine. But to be engaged in a hectic lifestyle, if I used that language with my family, they'd probably, punch me in the face and say, "What the hell are you talking about? Stop speaking like this." So it just feels a little bit like forced, like the candidate is trying very hard. A much more natural thing is, yeah, I think, nowadays people just are really busy and so they can't like find time to get to know their neighbors. That's much more natural than they are too engaged in their hectic lifestyles.
lifestyle is kind of fast-paced, so that people run out of the time to communicate and
Okay, run out of time, not run out of the time, but okay.
allocate enough time to interact with their neighbors.
Again, to allocate enough time. I just prefer find enough time. Allocate time, okay, it's a good collocation, but it just feels academic or heightened.
So that it sometimes in the big cities, people who are living in apartment or a skyscraper.
I I don't want to say that you can never ever use the word skyscraper in an IELTS test, but it's one of those words that for me is a red flag word, which is just like, every candidate wants to use skyscraper. But okay, maybe that's a Glyn problem, not a candidate problem. I certainly wouldn't mark a candidate down for using skyscraper. I just don't like it. It feels obvious that the candidate is trying to say, like, oh, look at me, I know the word skyscraper.
Even don't know about their neighbor. It's happening in the urban area, but in rural area,
Cool. Urban areas, rural areas. I like this.
it's the kind of
Must be very frustrating for a candidate just not to know what words I like and what words I don't like. Sorry about that.
reverse trend, and people are more engaged together.
What kind of problems could result from not knowing your neighbors?
Okay, in case
Just notice the candidate often responds to questions with okay, and you don't, that sounds a bit unnatural. Okay, to a lot of questions. We get okay, well, and actually. Those are the three most common responses. What do you do in your free time? Okay. Well, okay. We don't need that. Sorry.
of emergency, you need neighbors, and neighbors are the person who are always there.
Neighbors are the people, not the person.
And the most available and accessible person.
Maybe.
So that I think that people need to interact and engage with their neighbors.
We're overusing engage. I think we've had now engage, I think 5 times in the last 2 questions.
And they need their support in any cases.
Just feels a little bit like the candidate is struggling, not struggling to find answers to the questions. She's speaking, her answers kind of make sense, but it does feel a little bit like the candidate is finding this part a little bit more difficult than part 1.
Under many situations.
Which is normal.
And what are some causes of conflict between neighbors?
Some causes of conflict.
I like this. Some causes of conflict, repeating back the question to buy a bit of time. It's very natural.
Maybe some neighbors are not respect the others' privacy.
Are not respected, don't respect. Are not respectful of, adjective, they are not respectful of, or verb, they don't respect. So again, it's quite basic.
I mean, they don't have respect and they make a lot of noise. It's render a kind of conflict between neighbors, and this is because there are not. This is because the differences between the culture, and some people are not intelligent enough to respect other people.
I 100% agree with you there. The ability to respect someone else sometimes is definitely a question of intelligence, in my opinion.
Privacy and interact and distract people, other people.
Finally, let's talk about online communication. In what ways is communicating online different to communicating face-to-face?
Okay, in face
Game, get that? Okay.
to-face conversation, you have the opportunity to grasp a lot of non-verbal aspects. I mean, you
Cool. Love this non-verbal aspect. Not a big fan of grasp, but non-verbal aspects. Cool.
can grasp the body language, facial expression, or tone of voice, and the
You know, pick up on is a great phrasal verb here. You can pick up on non-verbal cues is better than you can grasp non-verbal aspects, right? That's the type of difference that kind of separates the 9s and the 8s from the 7s. Oh, you can pick up on non-verbal cues. Cue, not as in like waiting in line, but cue as in C-U-E, a non-verbal cue. Cue is like a sign, and that's the difference. Pick up on a non-verbal cue versus grasp a non-verbal aspect. Still love the non-verbal, and it still, you know, puts you in that band 7 contention, but yeah.
space between humans. However, in online communication, this kind of feature maybe is less recognized, and people just speak together and don't read the cue of their facial
Ah, we get the cue. Nice, nice, nice.
expression. And
But
I mean,
don't
I
you
mean,
think that, sorry, don't you
sorry.
think that things like emoji and capitals, don't you think that's a kind of a good replacement for those non-verbal forms of communication?
Can be good. It can maybe convey some messages.
Cool. Love this use of convey. Very nice.
However, it doesn't convey human interaction and emotion, and it doesn't make emotional bond between people. I myself ignore them.
Love this use of I myself also. I myself ignore them. That's so nice.
Okay, thank you. That is the end of the test.
All right, this is going to be a challenging one, a very challenging one to score, but it's okay. It's always nicer to have challenging ones to score. Fluency and coherence, I'm going to give the 7. So despite a little loss of coherence in part 2 and the occasional, let's call it difficult to understand, well, maybe not difficult, but the occasional lapse in part 3, your ideas are generally easy to follow. You use a range of connectives and other, not just cohesive devices, but I'm going to say discourse markers. Discourse markers, like little bits of functional language that we use, not just to connect ideas, but also to like introduce ideas and things like this. Of course, be careful that you don't overuse this okay and well, but like I myself, like that type of nice stuff. You also show a willingness and ability to speak at length without difficulty, except for some small moments in part 3. So I just felt like in part 3, there were a few moments where I felt like maybe these questions are causing you a bit more difficulty. Just a few, but I think enough for the 7 for C1. Lexical resource, I'm not going to give the 8 for this. I am going to stick with the 7. So you demonstrate an amazing range. You really do. You demonstrate an amazing range of vocabulary. which allows you to speak about a variety of topics in pretty good detail. However, just two slightly negative points. Some of your vocab feels forced. This, like skyscrapers or engaged in their hectic lifestyle. Some of the vocab feels a little bit unnatural and a little bit forced, like you're trying to squeeze in as much vocab as you can, and that does leave a negative effect on the listener a little bit. And could be seen. We're always looking for evidence of style and collocation and awareness of register and things like this. And it just feels sometimes like you're trying to show off with these heightened C1 magic words, like, oh, don't say I'm too busy, say my lifestyle is disproportionately hectic. And it's like, just feels sometimes like your use is a bit unnatural. Some of your vocab feels forced, and there are some times when the vocab isn't quite appropriate. Like to grasp non-verbal aspects. It's like, yeah, I understand what you mean, but it's just not quite right. It's just a slight inappropriacy. But I think enough for a 7, and you are knocking on the door of 8. I think if you avoid trying to use overly complex language and just rely on your everyday language, the normal English that you use, I think you probably would get closer to the 8. Grammatical range and accuracy, that's going to be the difficult one. Pronunciation, I'm going to give a 7 for this. So despite some small issues with particular phonemes, namely S and W. And you had like a bit of a problem with th, like you taught instead of thought. So despite those minor small issues, your pronunciation is very strong. Okay, what does that mean? Firstly, it means it's easy to understand you. It's easy to understand you without any effort. Cool. Your intonation is pretty strong throughout. I can change it not just to pretty strong, but is strong throughout. And in large parts, you show, let's say some good features of connected speech. I wouldn't worry too much about your pronunciation. I wouldn't see that as the place where you can target higher points. It's certainly possible that an examiner would give you an 8 for pronunciation. For me, it's just slightly closer to the 7 than the 8. But it is possible that an examiner would give you 8. In fact, I am going to change that to a score of 8. I am going to change that to a score of 8, but it means I'm going to give you 6 for grammatical range and accuracy. I think, and you'll often see this with examiners, if they are borderline, right? So at the moment, I'm borderline with two things. Pronunciation, is it a 7 or an 8? Grammatical range and accuracy, is it a 6 or a 7? Now, if I'm borderline with two aspects, I tend to give the lower mark for one and the higher mark for the other. It's just the way we as humans work. And by giving you that 8 for pronunciation, I can give you that 6 for grammatical range and accuracy. So firstly, your range of sentences is great. Cool. You use simple sentences, you use complex sentences, great. Your range of structures and your accuracy with complex grammar is great. Wonderful. So what is possibly stopping you? Unfortunately, you make repeated mistakes with the most basic structures. I don't know if I can say your pronunciation is worth more than your fluency and coherence, but okay, it's just the way that it goes. So for me, yeah, that one thing in your grammar, you know, it is give, or I am give, or I am try, or it is enhance. Those are the mistakes that we have to avoid. And so, overall, I'm not sure overall what an examiner would come out with. Oh, overall, I think an examiner would come out with a 7. Right, I think just listening to you, the impression mark is 7.0. The candidate did mention that she took IELTS not so long ago and got a score of 6.5, which surprised me. But it's probably because, I would imagine the previous examiner gave her 7 fluency and coherence, 7 lexical resource, 7 for pronunciation, and 6 for grammatical range and accuracy. And that's what gave her a score of 6.5. That's what I would imagine. However, the impression mark is that the candidate is at C1 level. Her language production is at C1 level. And I've kind of found a way by boosting the score for pronunciation. Maybe another examiner might boost the score for lexical resource, give an 8 for lexical resource, give a 7 for pronunciation, and give a 6 for grammar, and give her the 7 overall. But I think most examiners, the majority of examiners, would listen to this and say, yeah, candidate is band 7, and they'll find a way to give her a band 7. So, areas of improvement. Firstly, we'll go in order of importance. You have to find a way to stop making these basic mistakes with grammar. Now, the good thing is that it's not a lot. It's really not a lot of stuff, right? You tend to put the verb to be before verbs. It is give, I am trying. We don't do that. And also in part 2, you were using present tense instead of the past. It strike me and things like this. So keep in mind that we use past tenses for past time. Not always. We use past tenses for past time, and we don't use the verb to be before other verbs. I don't know if you understand all of this metalinguistic jargon. If you don't know what I'm talking about, let me know. Secondly, you don't need to force in complex language. There were a couple of grammar things, right? Had it not been for, or never had I been in such a situation. You're very comfortable with those grammatical forms, and I think you are so comfortable with them that you can insert those grammatical forms. I wouldn't have a problem with you memorizing that grammar and using them, because you know that grammar so well, you can activate it at will. Don't do the same thing with the vocab. The complex vocab that you try to force in, like hectic lifestyle and skyscraper, that stuff. Remember, IELTS is a test of your ability to use natural English in everyday normal situations. It is not to test your academic English. It is not to test your job interview English, your presentation English. It is not a test of like how many complex bits of language can you recite. That's not what the IELTS speaking test is. So really don't force in that complex language. And I think that's, yeah, and maybe the last point is just be careful. Just be careful to answer the questions directly. I think in some parts, in part 3, it just felt a little bit, and in part 2, like, well, I didn't quite feel like you answered that question in a fully satisfying way, which could, I think you should aim for 8 in fluency and coherence. Your fluency is very strong, and your coherence sometimes just drops a little bit. Yeah, so I think you definitely have a ceiling of an 8. I wouldn't be surprised if you took an IELTS test and got an 8. For me, it's band 7, but it certainly could drop to a 6.5. I definitely think an examiner could award you 777, 6 for that, for those grammar mistakes. Very difficult to unlearn and to force yourself to fix those grammar mistakes. If you have an English teacher, I would just ask them, can we just focus on this? Just find tasks that make me use this grammatical structure, and find a way, spot correct me, correct every mistake I make, maybe give me electric shock therapy every time I make this mistake, and hopefully, no, don't do that. Bad idea. But yeah, how you fix these mistakes or these inappropriacies, that's up to you. Anything I say is just guidance. It's just bits of advice, just my thoughts and reflections on your language use. But for me, overall, band 7.0, which puts you on the C1 right at the bottom of C1 Advanced, which is great, great, great. But I guess I will leave that there. If you have any comments about the way that I've scored this test, please let me know below. If you'd like your own free practice speaking test with feedback, or if you'd like me to check your IELTS writing, you can request this on my Telegram channel. A link to this channel is given in the description below. But for now, I will leave it there. Have a wonderful evening and see you all soon. Bye-bye.